Welcome back, Stock Car family, to what is now the fourth installment of the videos to put the motor in this car. Ran into a couple of issues. If you remember from one of the previous videos, the magnet came out along with the motor when I pulled it out. So had to take a break from the last video in order to reset the magnet here in its position and run a little super glue in there to hold it in place. And so it's looking good. And as you remember in the last video, we soldered up the motor, put the capacitor and everything back on there. All that's good. But guess what? As I was messing with the magnet and all that, the same thing happened that I kept warning you guys about earlier in the earlier videos. I broke a wire off the circuit board. So I had to disassemble another similar car and make sure I knew exactly where to solder this wire up, and I resoldered this green wire back where it goes, hooked it up to some power and tested it and made sure everything was good. So now we're ready to move forward again. And one thing I wanted to mention, though, while I was at it at this point on the cars, is that one thing that's very interesting about these AGM cars, a couple of things that they do about them, they're actually a little bit better quality than pretty much anybody else I've seen. They use these little, they're much more like a 132 car in that they use these little bushings on the axle that snap into place in the chassis, which is, like I said, is very similar to a 132 car, and that's actually, I think, is a pretty neat feature, rather than just having the axle rolling in a hole that's cut in the plastic chassis. But that's an interesting point. And now we're going to get to this motor. This is the old motor again, and we still need to remove the pinion. I'm going to take a look at it and kind of get an idea of just how far I need to push it down on there. It looks like it needs to go almost all the way on. And these two shafts, they're not quite the same length, so there's not going to be as much sticking out on the new motor. Now, I don't have a fancy pinion puller or any of that kind of stuff, and maybe this isn't the best way to do it, but I just use my fingernail and pull it off, and I go on over here and stick it on, and there we go. And try to carefully push it down to where I think it should go. And now that I've done that, I realize I should have given it a drop of oil first, so I think we're going to back up just a little bit. Put a drop of oil on this before we shut it down. Well, oh heck, I'll come back later with some oil. Alright, I feel like that looks pretty good. We're ready to go back in with the motor. And if you remember, the black wire was up and the ground wire was up. And we just need to snap this motor back into place. You stick your front end in there. And you want to try to push it as far forward as you can while you start pushing down, and it'll just snap right back in like you heard there. And there you go, it's done. It's in. The motor has been reinstalled. Now we're going to reinstall our rear end. As I mentioned, this is kind of neat. These just snap in also. You have to get everything lined up, though, and it's a little bit tricky, especially doing it with your hands stretched out in front of you. Okay, I think we're in the right position. It should, there we go, snap in. I think that's it. That side doesn't snap in quite as securely as the other side does, but I think that's it. Alright, now luckily I haven't yanked any more wires out. We're going to check out the mesh of the gears here, and that looks pretty good. I can probably pull this pinion forward just a tiny little bit, which I think I'll do. Use a tiny little screwdriver, stick in there and just bring it forward just a tiny little bit. There we go. Now I think it's rubbing more on the spot it was before. Feels pretty smooth. And all we have to do now is just put the body back on. And when you push the stuff back together, you have to be kind of careful that you get your wires out of the way of the wheels and stuff. You don't want them getting caught in the wheels or dragging the axles or any of that. So a lot of times you can just kind of push them and fold them down into the side areas of the chassis like this, and keep it away from the mounting posts where the screws are too. So we have to push that over a little bit, and then it should all kind of come back together real nice. So you get to hear a nice reassuring snap when it goes back together correctly. And then we just put our 3 screws back in. Remember, when you're doing the screws, this is just little plastic stuff, so you don't need to over torque it. I am very famous for stripping stuff out, so I'm trying to learn not to do that on these. But you know, once it's pretty much tight, just leave her be. Make sure that your wheels still spin good. You're putting this stuff together, and you can tell you did it right. Not feeling good about the back wheels all of a sudden here. Well, I think I'm feeling a little bit of wear is what I'm feeling here. Probably not a whole lot I can do about that. Well, anyway, you just snap your body back together, put your screws in, and you're done.